The bustling noise of the airport was overwhelming as travelers hurried to and from their gates, each lost in their own world. Luggage wheels clattered against the polished floors, and the announcement of flight numbers echoed in the background. Among the crowd, one woman stood out, a mother cradling her infant in her arms, her face tired but peaceful as she walked slowly through the terminal. The baby's soft cooing was barely heard over the distant chatter, but it had a soothing, calming effect on anyone who happened to pass by. But then, out of nowhere, a loud, sharp bark shattered the calm. It was so sudden, so unexpected, that it made everyone in the vicinity stop and turn. The woman flinched, instinctively tightening her grip on her baby, and her eyes scanned the crowd in confusion. What had just happened? At the center of the commotion was a service dog, its posture stiff, eyes wide, and ears sharply pointed forward. Its fur bristled, and it stood in front of its handler, an older man who was doing his best to keep control of the animal. The dog barked again, its voice louder this time, as if sensing something that no one else could. The mother took a step back, her heart racing. Was this dog going to hurt her or her baby? She didn't know how to react. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach, but there was something else too, something more unsettling. Why had the dog suddenly acted like this? What was it that triggered such a strong response? Around her, people started whispering. Some looked at the dog, others at the man, and a few exchanged nervous glances. The older man quickly murmured something to the dog, trying to calm it, but the animal wasn't having it. Its eyes never left the mother and her child. "Everything okay?" a voice from behind her asked. It was another traveler, his concern genuine as he watched the scene unfold. But the woman couldn't answer. She was too focused on the dog, her body frozen in place, her mind racing. Then, just as quickly as it began, the barking stopped. The dog lowered its head, its tail tucked between its legs. It was as though the energy in the room shifted in an instant. The tension that had hung in the air vanished, but the unease remained. What had happened? Why had the dog reacted like that? The woman's heart was still pounding, her breath shallow. She glanced at the older man, but he seemed just as confused as she was. He looked down at the dog, then back up at the mother, his eyes full of apology. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice thick with embarrassment. "This has never happened before. She's usually very well behaved." The woman nodded, trying to process the situation. Was it just a freak incident, or was something else at play? Why had the dog singled her out like that? She didn't know, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening. And that's when the woman noticed it. The dog's eyes weren't just focused on her and her baby. It was looking past her, its gaze fixed on something in the distance. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. There was a reason the dog had acted like that, and the reason wasn't just her or her baby. The crowd around them was starting to disperse, the excitement fading as people returned to their own routines, but the woman couldn't move. She felt like she was stuck in a moment, frozen by the strange energy the dog had unleashed. Her thoughts were interrupted by the older man speaking again. This time, his voice was tinged with something more than just apology. There was a hint of fear. "I don't know what's going on, but I think I need to tell you something," he said, his words slow, almost as if he was weighing each one carefully. "This isn't just any service dog. She's been trained for something more specific than most." The woman's eyes widened, a chill creeping down her spine. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The older man looked around nervously, as if making sure no one was listening. "She's trained to detect certain things. And right now I think she's sensed something here, something we're not supposed to be aware of." Her heart skipped a beat. What could the dog have sensed that was so dangerous, so hidden? She glanced around the airport, her mind spinning. It was just a regular day at a busy terminal, or so it seemed. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that something didn't add up. The man's face grew more serious. "I need to take her outside, but I'd advise you not to move from here. There's something in the air, something off. He looked back at the dog, his face lined with concern. The dog was no longer barking, but its eyes were still wide with alertness, scanning the area as if waiting for something to happen. Before the woman could ask more questions, the man turned and began walking away, the dog following obediently. But as they walked off, the woman couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had just happened was only the beginning of something much larger. Something she wasn't prepared for. And then, just as the man disappeared through the airport doors, the woman heard a faint sound, a whisper carried on the air. It was almost inaudible, but it was there. A voice, distant and yet somehow so close. The voice seemed to speak directly to her, as if it had been waiting all this time. The words she heard would haunt her for days to come. "You're not alone." What did that mean? And more importantly, who or what was watching? The woman stood still, her mind racing. The words she'd just heard echoed in her thoughts. "You're not alone." Who had said that? Was it someone from the crowd, or was it something else entirely? She couldn't explain it, but the whisper had felt far too real to be a figment of her imagination. It was as if someone had reached out from the shadows to speak directly to her. She shook her head, trying to make sense of it all. She glanced around, but the crowd in the airport had already started to thin out, each person too absorbed in their own business to notice what had just happened. The sense of unease lingered, though, thick in the air, and she felt an unsettling chill crawl down her spine. Something wasn't right here. Taking a deep breath, she forced herself to focus. She needed to calm down. The baby in her arms stirred, breaking her thoughts. She looked down at the small face nestled against her chest, feeling the weight of her responsibility. The world around her felt strange, foreign, and she couldn't quite understand why. There had been no reason for the dog's outburst, no reason for her to feel like she was in danger. She was just a mother traveling with her child, nothing special, nothing extraordinary. Or so she thought. The older man's words echoed in her mind again. "She's trained to detect certain things." What did that mean? What could a service dog detect that was so significant, so important, that it would cause the animal to react the way it had? And why had it focused on her, of all people? Her pulse quickened. She didn't know much about service dogs, but she knew they were supposed to help people with disabilities, not act as if they were guarding against something unseen. She couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a random occurrence. That dog hadn't just barked because of some coincidence. There was something in the air, something lurking just beneath the surface of the everyday hustle of the airport. She tried to push the thought aside, but the feeling remained. The sense of being watched, of being pulled into something she couldn't understand, refused to leave. Her gaze shifted to the exit doors through which the older man had disappeared. What was he doing with the dog? What could he possibly be hiding? And why had he spoken to her like that, so cryptically, as if he was trying to warn her, but at the same time, keep her at a distance? The whole situation felt off. She needed answers. The longer she stood there, the more her instincts screamed at her to leave, to get on her flight and forget everything that had just happened. It wasn't worth it, she told herself. She had a baby to care for, a life to live. There was no reason to get caught up in whatever strange situation was unfolding around her. But despite her best efforts to rationalize it, she couldn't let it go. There was something she was missing, something that had been left unsaid. As she adjusted the baby in her arms, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She jumped, startled, and pulled it out quickly. It was a text from her husband. "Hey, I just saw the news. There's been another report of a service dog reacting strangely at an airport in Miami. I'm starting to think this is bigger than just a freak incident. Be careful, okay?" Her breath caught in her throat. Another incident. She read the message again, trying to make sense of it. Why would there be reports of service dogs acting out at airports? Was it possible that something was going on that no one had figured out yet? Her mind raced, but her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. She spun around, her heart racing, but it was just a young couple rushing past, oblivious to her presence. She quickly glanced back down at the text message. Her fingers trembled as she typed a reply. "What do you mean? What's going on?" She pressed send before she could second-guess herself. Her phone buzzed again almost immediately. "I'll explain when you get home. Just be careful." The response was short, but his tone was enough to make her stomach turn. What was happening? And why was he so worried? As she waited for a response, she noticed something strange. People around her seemed to be avoiding eye contact, walking with purpose, yet somehow always steering clear of her and the spot where the dog had been. It was subtle, but it was there. She couldn't explain it, but it felt deliberate. Had they seen something she hadn't? Were they afraid of something? She looked around, trying to catch someone's gaze, but everyone was too preoccupied, too focused on their own business. The airport felt different now. It was as though the walls were closing in on her. She needed to leave. But something told her that running wasn't going to solve anything. What if the answers she was looking for were just out of reach? What if everything she was sensing was true? Something was going on, and she was being pulled into the middle of it, whether she liked it or not. Suddenly, her phone buzzed again, and she jumped, her heart pounding. It was her husband. "I just found something. You won't believe it, but I think this has something to do with the dog incidents. I'll send you a link. Whatever's happening, it's not normal." Her fingers moved quickly as she opened the link. The screen flashed to a news article, the headline bold and chilling. "Service dogs across the country reacting strangely, authorities baffled." She read on, her pulse racing with each word. The article described several recent incidents where service dogs had acted out in airports, hospitals, and other public places. Each one had been unprovoked, each one more violent than the last. What stood out, however, was the consistent detail. The dogs had all reacted in the presence of certain people. People like her. Ordinary individuals, with no apparent connection to each other. Her heart sank as she read the closing lines of the article. Experts are still investigating, but one thing is clear. Something is affecting the dogs, and it's beginning to spread. Her hands went cold as she looked at the screen. Was this what the older man had been trying to warn her about? Was she somehow connected to whatever this was? And most terrifying of all, what exactly was happening to the dogs? Just as she set her phone down, a sudden movement caught her eye. She looked up, her heart skipping a beat. There, standing at the far end of the terminal, was the older man with the service dog. The dog was staring straight at her again, its gaze unwavering. But this time it wasn't just a look of alertness, it was a look of warning. The animal was standing perfectly still, as if waiting for something to happen. And that's when she realized it. Something was about to change. Something that would pull her deeper into this mystery. And there was no turning back now. The older man's eyes locked onto hers from across the terminal, and for a moment everything seemed to freeze. The air felt thick with an unspoken understanding, a tension so palpable that even the sounds of the airport faded into the background. The dog's gaze never wavered, its sharp eyes fixed on the woman with an intensity that sent shivers down her spine. It wasn't just a warning anymore, it was a call to action. She felt herself take a hesitant step forward, her legs moving as if controlled by something beyond her own will. Something about the dog's presence made her feel like she had no choice but to approach. But as she took another step, she hesitated. Was she making a mistake? Every instinct screamed at her to turn away, to get on her flight and escape whatever this was. But the pull was too strong. She couldn't ignore it. The man watched her closely, his face tight with unease. His dog remained at attention, standing as if it were waiting for something crucial to happen. The woman glanced around nervously. The crowd seemed oblivious to the tension, moving past them without a care, unaware of the subtle danger that hung in the air. How could they not see it? It was right in front of them. She took another step. The baby stirred again, and she instinctively rocked it in her arms, trying to calm herself. She had to know what was going on. Why had the dog reacted like that? Why did she feel like she was somehow caught in the middle of something bigger than herself? As she walked closer, the older man spoke, his voice low and cautious. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his eyes darting around, checking to see if anyone was listening. "It's too dangerous." She stopped in her tracks, confused. Dangerous? What do you mean? The man sighed, rubbing his forehead as if trying to decide how much to reveal. I don't know how to explain this, he muttered. But what you saw. It wasn't just random. The dog, she's trained to sense something that's been spreading. It's not just airports. It's everywhere. Her heart skipped a beat. Everywhere. She struggled to wrap her mind around his words. What are you talking about? She asked again, her voice more insistent now. What is happening? What's wrong with the dogs? He glanced at her, his face full of regret. The dogs aren't just reacting to people. They're reacting to a presence. Something unnatural. And I'm not sure what it is yet, but I can tell you this. Whatever it is, it's connected to you. To your baby. Her stomach dropped. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Her mind raced, trying to process what he was saying, but she couldn't make sense of it. She looked down at her baby, still peacefully asleep in her arms. Her baby. What was this man talking about? Why would her child be involved in something like this? She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could form the words, the dog barked sharply again, a sound so jarring it made her flinch. The dog's eyes weren't on her anymore. They were fixed on something behind her, something in the distance. She followed its gaze but saw nothing. The older man stiffened, his face paling as the dog continued to growl low in its throat, its body tense. We don't have much time, he said urgently. You need to come with me now. Before it's too late. The woman felt a cold sweat break out on her forehead. Too late for what? She demanded, her voice rising with panic. What's going on? What do you know about my baby? About me? He took a deep breath, his eyes flicking to the dog and then back to her. I know this sounds insane, but I can't explain everything right now. All I can tell you is that you're in danger. There's something coming, and the dogs are the first to know. But they're not the only ones. There are others. People who are connected, people who are chosen. Her mind whirled. Chosen. What did that even mean? Was she part of some larger conspiracy? Was her baby part of it too? The thought of it made her stomach churn. She had never believed in anything beyond the mundane reality of everyday life, but the events of the past few hours had shaken that certainty to its core. Just as she opened her mouth to ask more, she heard a loud crash behind her. She spun around, her heart racing, and saw a group of airport security officers rushing toward them. The woman's eyes widened in panic. Were they coming for her? Were they somehow involved in whatever this was? The older man grabbed her arm, pulling her out of the way as the officers moved toward them. We have to go, he said urgently. Now! She barely had time to react before he was leading her toward a narrow hallway, away from the crowds and the chaos. The baby shifted in her arms, but she didn't have time to comfort it. Every instinct told her to run, but she was terrified of what might be waiting for her if she did. As they hurried down the hallway, she stole a glance at the older man. What's going on? She asked again, her voice trembling. Why are the dogs reacting like this? And why me? Why my baby? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled her into a small, empty office. The door slammed shut behind them, and for the first time in what felt like forever, they were alone. The older man leaned against the door, locking it behind them with a loud click. He exhaled sharply and looked at her with a mixture of fear and resignation. I'm not supposed to tell you this, he said quietly. But I don't have a choice anymore. You're involved in something much bigger than you realize. The dogs. They're reacting to a shift, change. And it's all tied to you and your baby. Her heart pounded in her chest as she took a step back, her mind struggling to process his words. I don't understand, she whispered. He shook his head, his eyes filled with regret. I wish I could tell you more, but I don't know enough myself. All I know is that something is happening and you need to be ready. You need to protect your baby. A cold shiver ran down her spine. The room seemed to grow darker, the weight of his words pressing down on her like a heavy cloak. What was he trying to tell her? And why did she feel like she was standing at the edge of something terrifying, something that was about to swallow her whole? Before she could ask anything else, there was a sudden knock at the door. 3 sharp raps. The man's face went pale, and he glanced at the woman with wide eyes. "Stay quiet," he hissed. "Don't let them hear you." Her heart raced as she heard the sound of footsteps outside the door, each step echoing in the stillness of the room. Someone was coming. And whoever it was, they weren't here for a casual conversation. The knock at the door sent a jolt of panic through the woman's body. Her heart hammered in her chest as she stood frozen, every muscle tense, every nerve screaming. The older man's eyes darted nervously to the door, then to her, and she could see the fear in his expression. This wasn't just a simple visit. Whoever was on the other side wasn't here for answers. They were here for something far darker. The footsteps outside grew louder, heavy and deliberate, almost as if the person was waiting for a response. The woman held her breath, barely daring to move, while the older man motioned for her to stay quiet. But what could they possibly do? They were trapped in this small, windowless office, the walls thick and unyielding. No escape, no way out. The silence between each knock was suffocating, stretching on forever, as if the person on the other side of the door was savoring the moment. The woman's eyes flicked to the clock on the wall. Time seemed to slow, stretching each second into an eternity. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Something was coming. She didn't know what it was, but it was coming fast, and there was no way to stop it. Her grip on her baby tightened, but she could feel the child stirring, sensing the tension in the air. The last thing she wanted was to panic in front of her baby, but it was hard to control the rising dread inside her. The knock came again, this time louder, more insistent. The older man's face was pale, his eyes wide with anxiety, and he motioned for her to move to the corner of the room, out of sight. She hesitated but followed his lead. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The strange behavior of the service dogs, the cryptic warnings, the sense of being watched. It was all connected, but to what? "Please, just stay quiet," the older man whispered urgently. His voice was shaky now, his hands trembling as he reached for something in his pocket. Was he carrying a weapon? Was he planning to defend them from whoever was on the other side? The woman couldn't be sure. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she crouched in the corner, her back pressed against the cold wall. Every second felt like an hour, and the noise of the footsteps outside was growing louder, almost as if the person were pacing, waiting for them to make a move. It was almost as though they knew exactly where they were, as if they had already anticipated their every move. Then the door handle rattled. The woman's pulse quickened, her body instinctively tensing. The older man shot a desperate look toward the door, his eyes pleading for whatever was about to happen to not happen just yet. She could see the panic in his eyes, the way his hands shook with fear. This wasn't just some random encounter. Whoever was coming for them wasn't just some airport security or an innocent bystander. This was something much darker. The handle turned, but the door didn't open. There was a brief, unnerving silence, and then a voice from the other side of the door. The words were low, controlled, almost casual, but there was an edge to the tone that made her skin crawl. "We know you're in there," the voice said. "We've been watching you. It's time to come out." Her heart skipped a beat. "They've been watching us." The words hung in the air like a threat, chilling her to the bone. How long had they been watching? Who were they? And why now? Was it because of the baby? Was she being targeted because of what the older man had said, because of the strange connection to the dogs? The older man tensed beside her, his eyes narrowing as if calculating the next move. She could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on both of them, and she knew that whatever was about to happen would change everything. There was no turning back. She could feel the pressure mounting, the sense of inevitability closing in around her like a vice. The voice from the door spoke again, louder this time, more commanding. "This isn't a game. We know what you're hiding, and it's time to give it up. Now." The woman's breath caught in her throat. What was she hiding? What could they possibly know? Was this about the baby? Was it connected to the dogs? Was there something more, something the man hadn't told her? Something that could explain why she felt like she was being pulled into something she didn't understand? The older man took a slow, deliberate step forward, his eyes never leaving the door. His fingers twitched, and for a moment, the woman thought he might do something reckless, something that could put them both in even greater danger. But then he stopped, his face darkening. He turned to her with a quiet urgency. "Stay back. Whatever happens, don't come out unless I tell you." Before she could respond, the door creaked. The sound was almost imperceptible, but it was enough. The woman's eyes widened as she saw the handle slowly turning once again, and for the briefest of moments, she felt as though the world had shifted. Time seemed to slow as the door opened just a crack. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears, drowning out all other sounds. And then a hand reached through the gap, its fingers cold and pale, moving with unnerving precision. The older man's eyes went wide, and he stepped forward, his body blocking her from view. "No!" he hissed under his breath, his voice thick with panic. "You can't take her. Not her." The woman's heart pounded wildly in her chest. What was he talking about? Who was he trying to protect her from? She wanted to shout, to ask what was happening, but her voice failed her. The situation felt too surreal, too overwhelming. The door opened wider, and a shadowy figure stepped into the room. A tall, imposing presence that made the room feel even smaller. The figure was dressed in black, the silhouette looming in the dim light. The woman couldn't make out the face, but she could feel the tension in the air. This was no ordinary person. This was someone dangerous. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The older man stood his ground, his body tense, ready for whatever might come next. The dog, which had been so calm moments ago, began to growl low and menacingly, its hackles raised, its teeth bared. The figure paused, eyeing the dog for a moment, before slowly turning its gaze toward the older man. "Step aside," the figure said in a cold, unyielding voice. "We don't have time for games." But the older man didn't move. "You won't take her," he said firmly, his voice shaking but resolute. The woman's breath caught in her throat. This was it. This was the moment when everything would either be revealed or lost forever. The question wasn't whether she would survive. It was whether she and her baby would be taken into something far darker than they could possibly imagine. The figure's cold eyes never left the older man as the tension in the room grew unbearable. For a moment, it felt like the world had stopped. Time itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. The woman's mind raced, her pulse hammering in her chest. She had no idea who this person was or what they wanted, but every instinct screamed that they were dangerous. Her baby shifted in her arms, sensing the danger, and she instinctively rocked it, trying to comfort herself as much as the child. The older man's defiance seemed to fuel the tension, but instead of retreating, the shadowy figure stepped closer. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," the figure said, voice cutting through the stillness like a knife. "We're not the enemy. But we will take her if you don't cooperate. And you both know what that means." The woman felt her blood run cold. The threat was clear, but it wasn't just about her baby. It was about something far more complex. Something that the older man had been hinting at. The growing sense of dread was palpable, but as she looked at the figure, something else nagged at her. Why did they need her baby? What could possibly be so special about a child that had been so ordinary just hours ago? And then, as if sensing her thoughts, the older man spoke, his voice low and filled with a quiet urgency. "You don't understand. She's more than just a child. You don't know what she's capable of." His eyes darted between the woman and the dark figure, and for the first time, she saw a flash of something other than fear in his gaze. There was a deep sadness, something akin to regret, but also resolve. The woman's heart skipped. What does he mean? What was he saying about her baby? This wasn't just some random threat. There was something bigger at play here, something far more dangerous than she could have imagined. Her mind raced, trying to piece it all together, but the more she thought about it, the more questions emerged. Why was her baby involved in this? Why had the dogs reacted the way they did? What was this connection to this shift the older man had mentioned? Before she could ask, the figure's hand shot out, faster than she could react, grabbing the older man by the arm and jerking him away from the door. The woman's breath caught in her throat. Was he going to hurt him? Was she next? But the older man's eyes didn't show fear. Instead, he shot her a look, a warning, a silent message that she didn't quite understand yet. "Get out," he barked at her, his voice sharp. "Run. Now." The words hit her like a blow to the chest. Run. Where? How? The room felt like it was closing in around her, and her feet seemed to be stuck to the floor. She wanted to move, to escape with her baby, but the shock of the situation left her paralyzed. For a moment, she simply stared at him, not understanding what was happening. "Go!" he shouted again, his voice breaking with desperation. The figure gripped him tighter, and the older man grimaced in pain. But his eyes remained locked on hers, his expression filled with something she couldn't place. "You need to protect her. You're the key now. Don't let them take her." Before she could respond, the figure jerked the older man back with a swift motion, and he collapsed to the ground, groaning. The woman's heart raced. Was he hurt? Was he going to be okay? She wanted to help, wanted to do something, but the figure's attention was now fully on her. "Enough games," the figure said coldly, stepping toward her with slow, deliberate movements. "I'm not leaving without her." The woman's chest tightened as she took a step back, holding the baby closer to her. She had no idea what was going on, but one thing was clear. The stakes had just escalated. This wasn't just a kidnapping. This was something far more sinister, and her baby was at the center of it. As the figure took another step forward, something strange happened. The air seemed to shift, the atmosphere heavy with an invisible force. The dog, which had been growling menacingly, suddenly let out a sharp bark and lunged forward, baring its teeth. The figure froze for a split second, his face a mask of surprise. The older man struggled to get up, his face twisted in pain. "Now, get out," he shouted again. "Run." Without thinking, the woman turned and bolted toward the door. She didn't know where she was going, didn't know what to do. All she knew was that she had to get away. She had to protect her baby. But just as she reached the door, a loud crash echoed through the room. The figure had thrown the older man aside, and he was coming after her, faster than she could comprehend. She barely had time to react before the figure was right behind her, his hand grabbing her arm with terrifying strength. The woman screamed, trying to pull away, but the figure's grip tightened. She could feel the force of his hand digging into her skin, and she stumbled, her baby's soft cries filling the air. The world around her seemed to blur as she was yanked back into the room, her heart pounding in her ears. But then, something unexpected happened. The dog, still growling and snarling, launched itself at the figure. Its powerful jaws locked around the figure's arm, sinking deep into the flesh. The figure howled in pain, stumbling backward. The woman's heart raced even faster as the creature released its grip, snapping and snarling like a beast out of control. The figure cursed under his breath, his focus now divided between the woman and the animal that had intervened. The woman saw her chance. She pushed forward with everything she had, slipping out of the figure's grasp. With her baby still clutched tightly in her arms, she ran. The hallway was a blur of motion as she sprinted through the airport, her mind on overdrive. She couldn't stop now. She couldn't look back. Her baby's cries echoed in her ears, urging her forward, and yet, every instinct screamed that something was closing in on her, just beyond her reach. The figure was still after her. He wouldn't give up so easily. As she rounded a corner, she skidded to a halt. The exit was just ahead, her chance to escape. But standing between her and freedom were two more figures, dressed in black, their eyes cold and unfeeling. She was trapped. And then it hit her. There was no escape, not really. They had planned for this. They had anticipated every move. And now, as the shadows closed in, she realized the terrifying truth. They had been waiting for her all along. The moment she saw the two figures blocking the exit, the woman's stomach twisted in dread. She was trapped. There was nowhere to go, no escape. Her heart pounded in her chest as she backed away, clutching her baby tightly, but the cold eyes of the figures followed her every movement. Her breath came in quick, shallow gasps as she realized the truth. They had been waiting for her baby. They knew exactly where she would go, and now they had her cornered. The figures didn't speak at first. They simply stood there, looming like shadows, their presence suffocating. But then one of them, a man with sharp features and a voice like gravel, finally broke the silence. "You're too late," he said, his tone cold and certain. "We've already got what we need." The woman's mind raced, her thoughts a blur of confusion and fear. What do they need? What are they planning to do with my baby? She couldn't understand it. Why her baby? Why was she the target of all this? Every instinct told her to fight, to do whatever it took to protect her child, but the weight of the situation, the overwhelming feeling of being out of control, made her feel small and powerless. Before she could react, the first figure stepped forward, his hand reaching out toward her. "It's over," he said quietly. "Come with us, and this can all end." But the woman refused to budge. Her legs trembled with exhaustion and fear, but she stood her ground. She wasn't going to let them take her baby. Not without a fight. She didn't know what they wanted, but she knew she couldn't give them what they were asking for. "Not a chance," she spat, her voice trembling but defiant. The second figure stepped forward now, his expression unreadable. "You don't understand," he said, his voice soft, almost sympathetic. "This isn't about you. It's about what she is. What she can become." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. What she can become. What are they talking about? The man's eyes darkened. "She's special. You have no idea how important she is." For the first time, the woman felt a flicker of understanding. She looked down at her baby, her tiny, helpless child, and something inside her clicked. Her baby wasn't just any child. There was something about her that these people had been after. Something they were willing to go to extreme lengths to obtain. Suddenly, the door at the far end of the hallway slammed open with a deafening crash. The woman whipped her head around, her heart leaping in her chest. A familiar figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the harsh light, and she felt a wave of both relief and dread wash over her. It was the older man, but something about him had changed. He no longer looked like the man she had once trusted. His face was grim, his eyes sharp with determination, but there was something else in them, something that she couldn't quite place. He stepped forward, his movements slow but deliberate. "Get away from her," he said, his voice low and dangerous. The two figures turned toward him, their expressions shifting from cold calculation to something closer to surprise. "You," one of them muttered, his voice filled with disbelief. "We thought you were." "Don't," the older man interrupted, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "I told you. You won't take her. Not now, not ever." The woman felt a surge of hope, but it was fleeting. There was still so much she didn't understand, so much she didn't know about what was really happening. Why had he been so determined to protect her? Why had he kept so many secrets? "Do you think you can stop this?" the second figure sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're just as much a part of this as we are. You can't escape what's coming. None of us can." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, but the woman didn't have time to process them. Without warning, the first figure lunged toward her, his movements lightning quick. In that split second, the older man stepped forward, blocking the attack with a swift, powerful motion. For the briefest moment, it felt like everything had stopped. The older man and the figure struggled, their bodies locked in a fierce clash. The woman's mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. The older man, he was fighting for her. But why? What was he hiding? Then, with a sudden brutal twist, the older man shoved the figure aside, sending him crashing into the wall. "Go!" he shouted at the woman. "Now!" Before she could move, the second figure reached out, grabbing her by the arm. His grip was like iron, unyielding and suffocating. "You won't escape," he snarled. "This is bigger than you. Bigger than anything you could understand." The woman struggled against his grip, panic flooding her veins, but it was no use. She could feel the weight of his words sinking in. What was this? What did he mean by bigger than you? And then, just as the figure was about to drag her back toward the darkness, something strange happened. The baby in her arms, her small, innocent child, began to glow. At first it was a soft, faint light, barely noticeable. But then it grew brighter, more intense, until the entire hallway seemed to pulse with a strange, otherworldly energy. The figures recoiled in shock, their faces filled with confusion and fear. The woman felt a wave of warmth and power radiating from her baby, and for the first time she understood. This wasn't just a random attack. Her baby was at the center of something much larger, something she could barely comprehend. The power in her child's hands, her very presence, was enough to make the men tremble. In a final, desperate act, the second figure let go of her, stumbling back in awe as the light from the baby intensified, blinding him. The older man's eyes widened as he watched the transformation unfold before him. This was it. This was what they had been protecting all along. As the light reached its peak, everything in the room seemed to shudder. The walls trembled, the air thickened, and the two figures vanished into the darkness, swallowed by the light. When the glow finally faded, the woman stood frozen in place, her baby still nestled in her arms. The hallway was silent, eerily so. The older man looked at her, his face a mixture of awe and fear. You had no idea," he whispered, his voice trembling. She shook her head slowly, her mind reeling. "No idea about what? What just happened?" The older man's gaze lingered on the baby, and his voice softened. "Your child. She's not just special. She's the key. The key to something no one understands. And they were right about one thing. None of us can escape what's coming next." The woman's breath caught in her throat, the weight of his words sinking in. This was far from over. Whatever this key was, it was just the beginning. And as the woman stood there, with her baby in her arms, she realized the true battle was only just beginning. The woman stood in the silence that followed, holding her baby tightly, her mind still reeling from everything that had just unfolded. The older man's words echoed in her ears. "None of us can escape what's coming next." She looked down at her baby, her tiny child who had just unleashed something extraordinary, something she couldn't fully comprehend. Was her child the key to something bigger, something dangerous? The older man's gaze softened as he watched her, sensing the turmoil in her eyes. "I know this is overwhelming," he said, his voice steady now. "But I promise you, you're not alone in this." She swallowed hard, trying to keep herself together. "Who are you?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why didn't you tell me the truth? Why didn't you prepare me for all of this?" He took a slow breath, as if gathering his thoughts. "I wanted to. But it wasn't the right time. You needed to discover your own strength, to see for yourself what your daughter is capable of. To understand that this isn't just about survival, it's about choice. And the choices you make from here on out will shape everything." The woman blinked, trying to wrap her mind around his words. "What are you saying? What choices?" The older man's eyes grew distant, as if lost in some memory or vision of the future. "There are forces at play here, ones that you and your daughter are tied to. I've been a part of this world for a long time, working in the shadows to keep it from spilling into the light. But you can't hide from the truth forever. Your daughter is more than just a child. She's the next step in evolution, and there are people, dangerous people, who want to control her power." The weight of his words hit her like a tidal wave. She had known something was off, something had been drawing attention to her baby, but now, with everything laid bare, it was almost too much to process. "You're saying my daughter has powers?" The older man nodded slowly. "Powers that are beyond anything you can imagine." She's part of a bloodline that's been carefully protected for centuries. And now, as her abilities grow, so does the danger surrounding her. There are organizations who will stop at nothing to harness that power for themselves. She felt a cold shiver run down her spine as she processed his words. She had never imagined something like this. She had just wanted to live a normal life with her baby, to protect her from the world. But now, she realized that the world wasn't just coming for her child, it was coming for the future itself. "Then what do we do?" she asked, her voice cracking under the weight of the question. "How do I protect her from all of this?" The older man stepped closer, his presence commanding but reassuring. "You protect her by understanding what she is, and what she isn't. She's not a weapon. She's not something to be controlled or used. But she is powerful. And with that power comes a responsibility. The responsibility to decide what kind of world she wants to help create." The woman looked at her baby again, feeling a surge of protectiveness like she had never known before. "But how? I don't even know what to do with this." The older man smiled gently, as if seeing something in her that she hadn't yet recognized in herself. "You already know. You just need to trust yourself and trust her. She will show you the way. You don't have to face this alone." A quiet moment passed between them, the only sound being the faint cry of her baby in her arms. She could feel the weight of her responsibility now, the magnitude of the choices ahead. But, for the first time since all this chaos began, she didn't feel completely lost. There was a spark of clarity in her, a recognition that she wasn't just protecting her child, she was fighting for the future. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," she whispered. "You don't have to be," the older man replied. "You'll never feel fully ready. But when the time comes, you'll know what to do. I'll be here to guide you when you need me. But ultimately, it's up to you and her. The rest of the world will be watching, waiting for you to make your move." The woman nodded slowly, the fear still there but tempered by something else, something that felt like resolve. She had a long road ahead of her, but now she knew she wasn't walking it alone. And she wasn't just a bystander in this strange new world. She was part of it. And no matter how daunting that thought was, she would do whatever it took to protect her daughter. As the older man turned to leave, he stopped and looked back at her one last time. "Remember," he said softly, "the world you think you know is only the surface. There's so much more beneath it. Your daughter will be the key to everything. What happens next is up to you." With that, he walked away, his footsteps echoing down the hallway until they faded into the distance. The woman stood there for a long time, her mind racing, her heart still heavy with all that had happened. But one thing was clear, she could never go back to the way things were. Her life had changed in a way she could never have predicted, and the weight of it settled on her shoulders. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She looked down at her baby, who had fallen asleep in her arms, her tiny face peaceful. For all the danger, all the uncertainty, this little girl was her world. And as long as she had her, she would fight. She would protect her with everything she had, no matter the cost. In that moment, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on, because the future wasn't something to be feared. It was something to be embraced. The truth about her daughter, the power she possessed, it was only the beginning. And as the woman walked out into the night, her heart filled with a new kind of determination, she couldn't help but wonder what the future held. Would she be able to keep her daughter safe from the shadows that loomed, waiting for the right moment to strike? But that was a question for another time. For now, she would hold her baby close and take the first steps toward whatever awaited them. The path ahead might be uncertain, but one thing was clear, she wasn't alone anymore. And that made all the difference.